Greetings, Oldways friends. I'm Dr. Stephen Alvarez. I'm on the Heritage Advisory Board member. Thank you for joining me here. I'm going to talk a little bit about one of my favorite holidays, Cinco de Mayo. And I have some questions here that are prompted. I'm going to try to address them and then leave you with some things to think about for this, well, distinctly Mexican American holiday, and maybe even more popular in the USA than it is in Mexico. The first thing is the question is, in my own words, what is Cinco de Mayo and what does it commemorate? Well, historically, Cinco de Mayo is a battle that happened in the state of Puebla, which is just outside of Mexico City. There was a French invasion, roughly contemporaneous with our Civil War here in the United States. The French, for a little while, occupied Mexico, but there was a Mexican resistance. And though the French did win the war over a long period of time, and did occupy Mexico, there were some battles that the Mexicans did win. One of these was in the Battle of Puebla, Cinco de Mayo. So this was largely a Mexican agricultural workers, really, who stood up to the French and defeated them. And it was a heroic battle. Losses for the Mexican people, but also a tremendous lift for the morale. And so historically, this is what the day celebrates. In the USA, it translates something different. I think here, even though the holiday isn't as celebrated in Mexico as it is in USA it's taken on a life of its own, something like the Mexican holiday akin to Irish St. Patrick's Day or something like this. Um, but really it becomes a celebration, I think, of being Mexican American and having this holiday in the USA, but still having those connections to Mexico and making sure that it's a public expressions and celebration, and generally being a day of welcoming everyone to join us and be a Mexican in a responsible way. How did you celebrate Cinco de Mayo growing up is the second question. And what do you think has become such a popular holiday in the USA, especially outside of Mexico? Well, I addressed that second part of the question, but I'll come back to it again in maybe a slightly different way. I grew up in southern Arizona, a small town a couple hours north of Tucson. The way I celebrate Cinco de Mayo, I think we had in my school, I think we did like chips and guacamole on Cinco de Mayo. Didn't really talk about the significance, but there would be things like piñatas and stuff like that. It was probably more culturally significant for me. It was I grew up Catholic, and the Catholic church where I grew up is largely Mexican American, and we'd have these fiestas. It's a Cinco de Mayo fiesta, and it would be a small parade that would happen around the church, and there would be performers, mariachis, and food vendors, things like cakewalks, fun games, and that was always really a happy time for me because it was the time where I think I got to see a lot of Mexican folks with grandparents, some of my friends, some of the first time I got to hear them speak Spanish because it was more of a something we didn't really always do at school. But this was a space where I think it was us to be proud to be Mexican, and then also to just really celebrate what it means to be Mexican in USA, of course. So let me bring it back to that question, why I think it's become such a popular holiday in the USA, especially outside of Mexico. And I think it's Mexican folks, we're proud in Mexico or Mexico afuera over here, but we're also I think it's a human thing, especially in the USA, is what makes us unique, but we also brings what do we bring to the contribution to this country? And the bigger thing I'd say, we've been neighbors for a long time, USA and Mexico, and a lot of people come here because they love this country. I mean, we love Mexico too, but we love this country. We come to this country because of the promises it has and the promises it's made historically for our people, but for people all over the world. And for this, as in the United States, every immigrant group contributes so much. And this day is, I think, one way for us to celebrate with our American paisanos, what we contribute to this country, but also saying, welcome, you're welcome to love us because we love you. Um, my favorite dish favorite dish or drink to enjoy in celebration of Cinco de Mayo. Well, I'll start with let's do a PG drink. Yeah, it's PG. I like horchata. Maybe have a lot of sugar, but I do like a nice horchata. But it is Cinco de Mayo, and I'm talking about Puebla. So I don't know, maybe having a nice mezcal, that might come from Oaxaca is a nice thing to have. My favorite dish, well, I'm always gonna go tacos. But since this is a holiday that celebrates the state of Puebla, I might recommend folks to try maybe, well, of course, Puebla is very famous for a type of torta, which is a sandwich called a samita. It's on a slightly different kind of bread. A samita is the name of the bread. It has sesame seeds on it, a little bit sweeter, and it has a delicious herb called papalo. Very, very aromatic herb, very distinctly Pueblan. Also has Oaxacan cheese, sorry, a very distinctly Pueblan cuisine. I think also tacos árabes, if you can find those. Those are another cool story that has to do with some of the Middle Eastern migration to Puebla and what became later on tacos al pastor. So tacos árabes are like the grandfather or the grandfather, right? The father of the tacos al pastor. So I would recommend tacos al pastor, taco árabe, or sambita to really connect you with that Pueblan identity. Uh, can I share five fun, meaningful, or educational ways to celebrate Cinco de Mayo while honoring its cultural roots? You bet I can. I have a little list here, so I'm going to go through. Well, I was watching Anthony Bourdain the other day, God bless, and he has a really cool show called A Cook's Tour. And if you ever check out an example of somebody really, I don't know, very, very and touching, moving ways getting to know Mexican culture, mostly because Tony Bourdain worked with the chef Eddie Perez here in New York City. And he goes with Eddie to Puebla and he gets to see where he's from. And he gets to eat with Eddie's family and learn more about Poblano culture. I really highly recommend A Cook's Tour. It's a little bit older, but definitely classic Bourdain stuff. I would also recommend, if you're on Netflix, checking out a series called Taco Chronicles. There's a whole series, I think the first two series or first two seasons are in Mexico, and the third season is in the USA, different cities. So check me out on the New York episode and a little bit on the Arizona episode, but all of them are fantastic and they'll make your stomach grumble. I'd recommend a really fantastic book from one of my mentors, Gustavo Arellano, great, great book, the book about tacos, Taco USA. There's a chapter about salsa, there's chapters about margaritas, the history of Taco Bell. Mm, interesting stuff all the way. That's Taco USA by Gustavo Arellano, and that is definitely a taco literacy classic. Um, Also, I would recommend supporting your local taqueria. And a hint for all of you looking for some really good tacos and to support your local taqueria, I would recommend checking out on Google Maps. And instead of looking for Mexican food or looking for tacos, use the search term taqueria, Taqueria, and see where see the host of places that might be outside your usual purview. And if you see something in Spanish, definitely go there. And don't worry if you don't speak Spanish, because if you bring money, they'll still like you. We'll always love you on Cinco de Mayo. And the last thing I would say, somewhat related, is checking out a Hispanic grocery store if you've never been to one before. It's checking out some of the produce, check out some of the aisles for some of the things that might be like the candy is incredible. I shouldn't be talking about candy, but the candy selection is pretty incredible. Not always sweet, but sometimes a little bit spicy. The produce, like I said, and also just kind of different varieties of salsa and canned goods and things like this to come check out. It's definitely some new things to learn about. If you've never seen nopales before, it's worth asking somebody, but also maybe make a new friend. You can ask how to prepare this stuff. And so, my friends, thank you so much, Oldways, and gracias a ustedes. And I hope you celebrate your Cinco de Mayo responsibly and respectfully. Thank you.